Good evening, everyone. Ready to start?
Hi.
Hi, I'm Al, back here with Ari for the Nonlinear Love podcast, where we interview folks about dating, love, romance, breakups, and divorce. With us tonight is Tara Ellison. She's an accomplished author. Tara, how are you?
Hi, I'm good. Thank you for having me.
So, just picking up on your recent piece in Vogue, I wanted to ask you if in 2025, is it in vogue to be divorced?
Well, it certainly seems that way, doesn't it? I mean, it's your business, so probably you're the right person to ask. But I started noticing all this sort of divorce lit and people sort of promoting it as it's really cool and this is how you find yourself. And that can be true. And sometimes you do need to get divorced in order to do that. But I wanted to offer a different perspective in that you can if you're searching for that, how do I, I've lost myself in a partnership, how do I find myself again? I just wanted to offer that you don't have to get rid of your partner in order to do that. So that was my version of like, okay, yeah, I did get divorced in my 30s looking to find myself, and now I'm in my 50s, and I feel like that next wave of like wanting to find myself, but I'm choosing to do it with a partner instead of booting my partner.
I feel like that was such a fresh take. When I read that, I was like, it's actually really because so much of what you see, like my generation and even the generation below Gen Z, I'm a millennial, everyone in Gen Z is like, dump your person, like immediately, And I think sometimes there is merit to that, but sometimes there are ways to work it through. For you, like, what do you think, you know, making the decision to work it through when you had previously felt like you were a bit of a commitment phobe? Um, was that something gradual, like built up, or how did you come to that conclusion that you wanted to stick with it?
Well, in my first marriage, I just had this sort of like itch of like, I have to get out of this. I can't do this. And my ex and I were not really a great match, and he's with somebody that's really much better for him. So I can look back and look at it and like, was that just my commitment phobe issues? But I really think like legitimately it wasn't the right fit. But it almost like set my skin on fire. I was like, I can't do this. And then, now that I've been with the same person we've been married for 13 years and then together for like 19 now, which is just something I never thought I'd be able to do. First of all, I didn't think I had the attention span. Like, who's going to stick with the same person for that long? Like, how does anybody do that? And I didn't have role models for that. But also, I realized that I was looking to him to sort of, you know, fix me, fill me up. I was putting too much pressure on the relationship, and that's not his job, and he doesn't want that job. And I'm probably not terribly easy to be in a relationship with. I mean, there's good and there's bad, right? But I just realized that like instead of kind of putting all the emphasis on the relationship, maybe I needed to kind of take some of that focus back and outsource a lot of pieces of my life and in terms of work and things like that that filled me up instead of looking to him like, okay, you're my person, you're supposed to be all these things for me.
Why didn't you have role models to be with a partner, in a heavy dose as opposed to small doses?
Oh my god, it was such a shit show. I had my mother was a single mother and she didn't think she could get pregnant, and she had me at 22 in London, and my father was someone she was dating. They weren't like having this crazy serious relationship or, aiming towards marriage. It was kind of like he went away for a while and she had me. It's not like there were cell phones back there that you text someone, "Oh, by the way, I'm pregnant." So when he got back to London, it was like, "Oh yeah, well I had this kid." So they as much as they really liked each other until he died, like a year and a half ago, they had a very close sort of friendship that blossomed later in life. So, maybe they could have worked it out, but I don't think so. So then my mother and I were just kind of a team, and I saw different guys sort of come in and out of our lives. And I just didn't have role models. So there weren't many people in my family that had like really good, stable relationships I could look to. All my Aussie relatives were, you know, not great examples of marital bliss, and most of them avoided it actually. They had kids, but they didn't want to be married. That's a whole other story. But so I didn't know how you did it. All I knew was like, okay, there's sex involved, but like outside of sex, like, well, what are you supposed to do? How do you kind of cement the relationship? How do you build your rituals? Or I didn't have a foundation for what that looked like.
What was the longest romantic relationship that your mother was in?
Hmm. Well, it's funny because I've been asking her. She has dementia now, which is really very sad. I've written about that. And, if I catch her in a good moment, her memory in the mornings is quite clear of the past. If we talk for like 20 minutes or half an hour, we'll cycle through where she says the same thing 5 times over again. But if I catch her at the right time, we can revisit those old memories. And I asked her, like, what do you think was your longest relationship? And it's the one she's in now, I think. Let's see, this is her second husband. But she had 3 kids with 3 different fathers and only married the last father. So, so, she's pretty funny, but we both got married within 6 months of each other. So she's been, I guess, like 13, 14 years with her husband, and I've now been with my husband married for, 13 years. So there's a parallel there. But before that, I think maybe like 10 years was the longest for her.
In my world, you hear about the impact on children of having a parent with multiple partners. So you were talking about men coming and going.
Yeah.
So actually having been through that as a child, how did that shape you?
Well, it put an overemphasis on men because, back then there weren't as many opportunities for women. So basically, my mother was very much a feminist and kind of doing her own thing, but she still really wanted to have a man in her life. She didn't necessarily want to keep him, but she wanted, that I think she was maybe addicted to that sort of love or that thrill, or, it just feels good when you're excited about somebody. So, it just put a lot of emphasis on like, okay, well, you have to look cute for men and like, dress nicely, and you needed to be skinny and be in shape, and like all these things that were sort of the messaging from her, and just things that I picked up watching her, and also culturally. And then we get into like the 80s with all the like Olivia Newton-John and Physical and all of that sort of imaging of like, this is what you're supposed to look like. But in my mind, it was the end goal was, okay, well, this is what you need to do in order to get a partner. So it wasn't like, oh, this is what you do for yourself. It was kind of like, oh, these are, this is what you do so you look cute and you'll, attract a great guy or something. So it made me think that all men leave, or that, and so that sort of played out in my own life. But when I really looked at it, I was the one leaving them. But in my head, I was like, oh, men leave, so I might as well like leave him before he leaves me. So, it was pretty messy, and I did feel really conflicted about getting divorced and doing that to my own child, who was very young at the time. She was like 2 or 3. So, yeah. And then, these things are very difficult for kids. They're very, very hard for kids. So, does that mean stay with somebody that in your heart is it's not right in order to? But then I've talked to friends that have had parents that have stayed together, and they've said, wow, we really wish that they hadn't, because it was just so stressful, and we knew that they were so deeply unhappy, and that they were just staying together for us, and they didn't want that sort of weight on them. So it's really tricky.
Yeah, what you just said a little while ago about the, you know, rejecting before you get rejected or leaving before you get left, that really resonates with me. But I also wanted to ask about your mother, and you write so much about her. And as a writer myself, I think a lot about like the subjects in my writing and like that when you do autobiographical memoir stuff. Um, how did you like when you first started writing about her? When was that, and how did you approach her about that? And the people in your life who end up in your writing, how does that? Yeah, how do you handle that?
Yeah, it's so tricky because, when you write about the people in your life, they're not always going to be happy about what you're saying, or their recollections are different, or they don't like that you're highlighting an aspect of the relationship that they'd prefer you didn't. But, the way I feel about it, especially with my mother's always been my muse. Like she had, I guess because she was a single parent and I didn't have another, that there was sort of an over focus on her. And I really watched her all the time. And I watched her for clues because sometimes she would go out at night and I'd wake up in the morning and she hadn't come home. So there was always that like um that sort of anxiety. So it took a long time actually for it to sort of filter through. It wasn't until my 30s that I started to really write about her, and I wrote a novel because I wasn't really brave enough to write my own story, but I sort of wrote something a little bit inspired by my story about getting divorced and dating as a single mother. And my mother was a character in there based, I made her more outrageous, but I told her about it. And I think she kind of, don't think she ever read it, which is probably a good thing. But she was sort of comfortable in um, the fact that she was very alluring, or she still is actually. She was very attractive to men, and there's a lot of power that comes with that. And she was very sexual, and I think she just sort of owned it. And historically, whenever I've tried to like say to her, hey, well, you did this and you moved us here and you do that. And she's just kind of like, yeah, and she'll laugh. So you can't ever get any traction with her. Like she won't like come back and say, well, or defend herself or anything. So she just kind of like shrugs and just like, yeah. And it's very disarming and it's actually very effective because what can you do with that? She just sort of shrugs it off. So I think that she might have sort of liked that she was kind of a femme fatale figure in this novel that I wrote. And then she read like My Modern Love and some other there was one piece that I wrote for Harper's Bazaar about finding love as a fatherless girl. And she said that that made her very upset and that I hadn't prepared her for that. And I felt badly about that, but I also felt like it's my story and I feel very committed to telling my story, and this is something that comes up with my husband because I write intimately. I write about a lot of issues that probably most husbands wouldn't be okay with, but he understands. I mean, there's a lot of negotiation that happens, but he understands that I really have this sort of need that keeps me sane. The fact that I can write these things, even ones that just sit on my computer and don't go anywhere. Um, the act of writing it really helps me kind of process it, get it out. But yeah, my mother has been my biggest muse for my entire life, really. My role model, and I emulated her, not really on purpose, but my mannerisms sometimes, like I'll realize I'm doing something, I'm like, oh my God, I'm just like my just like my mother. But she hasn't been reading any of the pieces lately. So um I do feel a little bit guilty, but I also um feel like it's okay in a way.
So you had written this piece, my mother's envy will outlive us both. What do you mean by that?
Well, that wasn't my title. Um so that was I wasn't quite sure why they picked that title, but um, there was this really deeply competitive thing that emerged between us when I was a teenager, and it took me a long while to understand. Um, that, well, she would like flirt with my boyfriends or flirt with guys that I was going out with, um, and she was she was a little bit like little meaner than she needed to be with certain things, and I felt like she sort of abandoned me in different ways as a teenager in terms of dealing with men that like I felt like, wow, I really could have used a mother's guidance, but it's almost like, sometimes she watched scenarios play out and kind of, you know, didn't weigh in or didn't protect me or didn't do anything and didn't say, you're 15 and you're dating a guy that's at least 20 years older than you. Like, what is that about? Or what, it was somebody that had plenty of money and she thought it was like cool or whatever. And so that I got my mother's attention by sort of dating sort of shiny men, like bright, shiny objects. So there was that competitiveness. And then with the dementia coming out, her husband told me that like she gets really fixated on, she keeps talking about like when I walked into a room, she's saying about a casino that we all went to, I don't know, Atlantic City or something, and this is so many years ago, I was like 18 or something, and she thought that people were looking at me and not her. So her mind keeps like tripping her back there. She keeps reliving it and reliving it, and he's told me this story over and over and over. I'm like, still? She's still talking about this? So, that's what that means, that envy is like really sort of still present. And it would exist in certain ways, like when she came to visit after COVID. She came a few times before she couldn't really come visit anymore. Like she would always flirt with my husband, and she was very into him, and just like, oh my God, Rob looks so good with that beard. And even my daughter was like, God, that's so inappropriate. Why does she keep saying that? So there's always like she has to feel like all eyes are on her. And I've been so used to it. Like there was a boyfriend I had in my early 30s before I got married, and he would say to me, like, it was just your mother was just so competitive with you. So it was reflected back from other people. And we actually set my mother up. She was single at the time with a friend of this guy that I was dating. And we all went to dinner at his house. And he told my boyfriend, he was like, yeah, well, she's very cute, the mother, but she's so competitive with her daughter. So it was very obvious to other people and I just kind of like, that was my life. And I let it, I was so used to it. But then when it came back around now, in the last couple of years, that was really like, wait, we're still like back there? Like, it was just really strange to me. But I don't know.
And
It's like,
it was just the two of you for so long, right?
yes.
Yeah.
It was a huge relief when she met my stepfather, and he's the one that brought us to America. He's dead now, unfortunately, but he was a very cool guy and stable guy. Um, uh, they both were having affairs, I guess, but I didn't really. I knew about my mother. I didn't know about him until my mother told me. But it was so much more stable than anything I'd dealt with. So it was like, yes, this is great. We're going to be a family. We're going to America, which was my biggest dream. My whole life as a little kid, it was all about going to America. So all my dreams were coming true at once. So like the little details didn't really matter.
With your mother, the power, the sexual power that she had, and the desire to have this male gaze. I'm wondering for you, like how your relationship with like your own sexual power and the male gaze evolved. I know that's a big question, but I'd be interested to hear.
Um, well, I feel like it was in the genes. Like my grandmother was very lusty, and she also had affairs outside her marriage, and her husband did too. So when I found out about that, I was kind of shocked. But since then, I found it so fascinating that she was so ahead of her time. They had kind of this open marriage where they both sort of pursued lovers. And I thought that was quite fascinating. But I feel like it sort of activated in my genes. That's like one way of explaining it, but it also could have just been that that was what I saw. And, my mother sometimes had sex in the same bed with me there when I was little because we shared a bed a lot of times. And so there was just this constant like awareness of that dynamic of like, oh, there's a man there, and that we had to sort of recalibrate everything towards the man. And the male gaze sort of came out of that. And I think I was a teenager probably, and I started noticing. And my mother even said, oh, well, you'll start to notice like, oh, that person's looking at me, and like, oh, actually, they're kind of cute. And you look back. So she was kind of instructing me in a little way, I guess, but, and then later she would pick out guys for me that she thought I shouldn't miss, and then even if I didn't really care about them, I would, go after them or go out with them, and sort of like a trinket for my mother, like, "Here, I went out with this guy you wanted me to go out with." But, with that male gaze, and you have talked about this before, Ari, but, a lot of that can be quite negative. And I feel like being unparented, being alone a lot, and, you know, for certain periods, my mother wasn't even in the same country. Like I was living in Australia with my aunt, and she was living in Hong Kong. So she didn't have any sort of idea what was going on in my life. And I felt like I was definitely, um, it was like ringing a gong for predators because I was young, impressionable, had no um, older male in my life. So a lot of things sort of happened that I wish. I mean, now, what are you going to do? But I do wish that I had been able to have a sense of boundaries and a sense that I had the right to protect myself because I really didn't feel I didn't learn that as a child. I mean, obviously, if she's, bonking in the same bed, there's not that sort of, okay, this is not what we do in front of my kid. It was like, well, anything goes. So I kind of thought like anything goes. Like I accepted a ride home from this instructor at the gym, who's the aerobics instructor. And I ended up losing my virginity because he was like, "Okay, well, I'm gonna give you a ride home, but we have to stop by my house first." And we get there and I'm waiting in the car. "Oh no, no, I gotta get something, but like come inside. I want to show you whatever." And I didn't know that I was agreeing to jump into bed. Like I mean, it was just a big mess. And so there are things like that that I really feel like, oh, I didn't get off on the right foot. And had I had better teachings or anybody that had sort of said to me, look, just because some guy, and yeah, he's 25 years older than you, but you have agency over your own body instead of just sort of giving all my power away. There are things like that that I really wish I could do over, but you don't get a do over. So I just take all of that material and, you know, share it in the hopes that other people can kind of hear it if they need to hear it.
And it sounds like there was this added layer for you beyond just the male gaze, but that your mother actually encouraged it, and she would be impressed by you doing that sometimes, which I think the other end of that is like the shame, and to be like slut shamed and told that you are like a bad girl when you're
Yeah.
growing up for doing that. So like both ends of the spectrum are not, they're not ideal, but they do, yeah, it's like what you were saying before about the trinkets and your mother being impressed by that.
Yeah. I definitely felt a lot of shame. I felt really, I couldn't understand what my mother saw in men, if like that was how they made you feel, like cheap, used, like, whoa. I was like, well, what is the appeal? Um, but those were, there were a few bad instances, but then, it was really fun to be desired or to have a crush on someone and to, hope to see them or go out with them or maybe kiss them. Like there was a lot of fun to it. So I don't want to make it sound like it was all so negative, but it definitely sort of opened the Pandora's box and it's like, okay, wow, well, this can be now that I've already, I've lost my virginity now and like there's no going back there and hopefully it gets better at some point. But yeah, I mean I do wish that I had had more guidance uh if someone had been like looking out for me.
You had said earlier, Tara, that your husband, for lack of a better word, is cool with what you write and what you publish, but that you could see that many husbands might not be. Why'd you say that?
Yes, well, if I say he's cool with what I write, um, hopefully.
He isn't. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, well, I this last piece I wrote for LA Times about vacation sex. Like he really had a hard time with that one. So there was a lot of discussion that happened with that one. But I sort of felt that was I was telling him it's like a public service announcement. Like other couples are struggling with these things and trying to sort of figure out how to match sexual desire and appetites and everything else. So, but yeah, he would rather I didn't write about sex so much. But the thing is, in your 50s, like your hormones are changing, sex is changing. I feel like it's a particularly ripe time to write about all these things that are changing. And also, people like we're talking about before is like, this sort of divorce culture. It's kind of easy if you start hitting some of those road bumps, like, oh, I can be done with this marriage when it might have been a hormonal thing. It might have been, I just feel like this time is so rich to write about. So he understands that I try to find a common ground with him that like he can live with. So far I've been able to do it. But also, it puts me in a tough position because um if I write fiction, people sort of assume it's true. Then if I write nonfiction, various people are going to get angry. But that my need to sort of write and express it is so great that, I'm like, okay, well, what can I do that's not going to piss everyone off? Nothing. So I pretty much have to kind of follow my own heart with that, I think.
Do you have a preference between writing fiction or nonfiction, or it's what strikes you in that moment?
Well, I do love fiction. I do have ideas all the time for things, but I also feel like writing nonfiction feels braver. And sort of the way I view it in my head is I have certain nonfiction projects that I need to do first before I can then move on to some fiction ones.
That's exactly how I feel, where I'm like, once I write this first memoir, like then I can finally go on to the it's like I have to get something off my chest first that is honest to me before I then can like embellish and stitch things together into something more fictional.
Yeah, it's powerful, isn't it? That need to sort of like clear the air kind of with
You
what
were talking earlier, I think, about right changes in your 50s. And I think I read in one of your pieces you said you were depressed at age 50. How come? What is it about? Is it something specific about that mark in life or
well, the piece that I think you're talking about was how I sort of gave myself a reboot at age 50. I was like feeling a bit lonely, feeling a bit depressed. And also, that's another thing. Like, you can feel lonely in a marriage. Marriage is not like a guarantee against like feeling lonely, which I thought I would like share with people. But I was depressed, and part of it was that I had had open heart surgery at 49. And I don't think they prepare you enough for how fucking miserable you're going to be. And the depression that comes is I've been in these support groups and everybody says it. It's not like, oh, 30%. No, everyone says that there's a depression that happens. And I've talked to women whose husbands are even taking like beta blockers and things like that. And they notice like a heaviness. So I think that it's so symbolic when you have something with your heart and, especially like open heart, you're like literally cracked open. Um, but I have now been able to kind of shift it and see it as a good thing because it kind of like reset. It gave me a reset in a way. And a lot of good things, like writing wise and life wise, have come from that moment forward. So I kind of feel like, um, my working theory was that I had had this crazy childhood and that maybe my heart had broken during it. And I was sort of limping along with this like sad heart and not knowing it. I didn't know it till I was 41 actually, and it was diagnosed. So I had just had this like really sad heart that was too thick and needed to be thinned out, which is as barbaric as it sounds. So that was a huge part of feeling, that happened at 49. So then I'm looking at my 50th birthday and I was just like, what's next? What happens next? And the recovery is very hard. So you really don't feel like yourself for maybe a year. So I that was 6 months before my 50th. So I was still kind of in my process of trying to feel like a person again. Um, so that's really why it was like a
Could
number of
could you write during that year or no?
I did. I took a lot of notes, and I wrote just about the sort of agony of it and like feeling. I went through so many sort of waves of thinking about like, wow, before I went in for the surgery, I would say to my husband like, okay, last chance to see me in a swimsuit with no big like scar on my chest, and I was like really sort of battling with like wow. Never thought about my cleavage very much before until I like thought, wow, there's going to be this huge gash. Like, so there were sort of like weird, like vanity things that I was like, whoa, who am I even going to be with this like weird scar? But then, after a while, you start to think, oh, it's pretty cool. And I would take notes. My big thing every day when I was recovering was I would go into the bathroom and look in this magnifying mirror and like see what was going on with the scar. And like, then I would just imagine those like hard bits dropping away. Like, these are parts of myself that I don't need. I can just like shed those, go on, let go of them. And maybe it was effective because a lot of things clicked into place for me after that.
So, as a woman in your 50s, what would you say either to a younger version of yourself or to younger women about this period of time in life? And obviously, it can vary so much depending on where you live and what's going on in your life. But yeah, I guess what would you say to a younger version of yourself, and what would you say to other women about this point in
About
time in life
about
being in your
midlife or about in general? Okay,
mid?
so I would say don't believe the bad press that it's something terrible or you're not, there is this thing that happens where you sort of feel like, oh, there's not that male gaze anymore. Like you feel kind of invisible. And then it's sort of weird, but then it's like kind of okay. And so there are all these things that happen. But I would just say the women I know in their 50s are so incredible, doing wonderful things with their lives. They're deep, they're experienced. They have this, huge capital of just having faced life for 50 plus years and all of the good stuff, the juicy stuff, the pain, the humor, everything. And it's like you harness that and you can pour it into whatever you want because if you have a family, what they need from you is slightly different. So you kind of get that energy back for yourself. And no one had ever presented it to me like that before. So I didn't know that could be a really cool time. So by the time you get there, it will be much more acknowledged, I hope, that, this is a really rich period of time for women. And I would say to like a younger, like, when you're in your 30s, you're still like striving. You're trying to look for your partner. You're like doing your, work thing. You're thinking about, do I want to have a kid or what? It's like a lot, a lot, a lot. And then like once I hit 40, I kind of let go of a lot of that. And then 50 especially. So don't believe the bad press. It's actually so much more wonderful than anybody's told you.
So where does volunteering with seal pups come in?
So I was doing that this week. Volunteering, I find, is, I mean, it's generally acknowledged to be such a really good thing to do for yourself, but also to expand your world and be doing something for the collective. So I sort of fell into this seal and sea lion rescue, and it's been one of the most incredible experiences of my life because I have sort of the access when I'm in there with these seals and sea lions. You probably would have to be a vet to have that kind of access. And I've this is my seventh season, and it's like, who's saving the seals? Am I saving them or are they saving me? And like I think that, working with them for all these seasons now and being of service and like feeding them and prepping the fish, making the fish smoothies, hand feeding elephant seals. Um, scrubbing the pens. It's just been mind opening. It's been blown my mind, but it's also I can still surprise myself because it's something I would never imagine. Like just all the things that we get up to with these marine mammal rescues. It just I wouldn't have ever thought at 30 if someone said, "Okay, when you're in your 50s, you're going to be like tube feeding sea lions. You're going to be, um helping to tag elephant seals and feeding them and being these sort of surrogate moms." I mean, that something that I would never, there was nothing in my background that you could have looked at to said, oh, okay, this is what she's going to do. No. So, as you get older, sort of the ability to still surprise yourself is really, really valuable, I think. So whatever that looks like for you. For me, it might be seals. For you, it might be horses, or it might be, you know, volunteering in an animal hospital, or who knows? It could be working with old people. Um, old people. It could be for a while I volunteered in the NICU, and I also volunteered in one of the playrooms at Children's Hospital. That was in my 30s. So I think it's just an incredible thing to do. And you meet so many wonderful people, you get a sense of community, and it's outside what you would normally be doing.
So is that different than, you were talking about striving in your 30s? Don't you think that's still a form of striving now at your age, or do you think it's different?
It doesn't have the energy of striving. It has the energy of like, I need to pay attention here, or one of these seals is going to bite me. So it has a different energy of like, I have to be present. I have to, there's Zen-like states, like where you're cleaning a pen, or there's a lot of like washing and scrubbing and like a lot of cleaning that happens. And it's very sort of therapeutic in a strange way, but I don't feel like it's striving. I feel like we're there, we have a common goal to like get through the season, help as many as we can. And this year there's been like a really bad sea lion event with the domoic acid. So there've been a lot of sea lions dying and in really bad shape. And so it's been extra high stress this season. So maybe striving to save as many as we can, but it's a very different energy from the striving in your 30s because it's all kind of ahead of you. Whereas now it's like, I'm like, okay, I really like where I am, so I can enjoy the view. It's not feeling like I have to get somewhere.
It sounds like it's also a part of it is doing it because you want to, not because you feel like you have to. And it's a bit more, there's a patience and a calm to it. Whereas I think as somebody in their 30s, there is this you have sometimes energy within yourself, or there's peer pressure to be hustling and yeah, finding the partner, making the money, building the house. And I suppose later on it's, yeah, you're doing something not because there's an urgency to hustle, but because you want to give back, or and do it in a more calm manner.
Right. Well, you said it perfectly, the hustling. There isn't a sense of hustling with this, like in my 30s. That hustle was like everywhere. But this is just there's an urgency to it only as dictated by what the animal needs, not like what I'm trying to achieve for myself or anything else. So it sort of casts it in a different light. I highly recommend it.
You were talking, I guess, when we started about, finding your true self or whatnot, and do you need to get divorced or not to do that? Do you think finding your true self is that a soundbite or is that a real thing? In other words, we're all here, we found ourselves, but because I see podcast after podcast about how to find yourself, and what exactly are we searching for?
Yeah, well, yeah, I love that you said that because it does seem so sort of nauseating in a way that like everybody's saying it, but I definitely feel like I think every decade we're finding ourselves in a different way. Like, in teenage years, I definitely just had no clue and was trying to latch on to something that might be. Usually it was like finding my identity through whoever I was dating and what they liked. And then in my 20s, I was still sort of, you know, trying to find myself my cousin in Australia used to like say something funny. She'd say, "Oh, Tara never makes a move without seeing a shrink or a psychic." And I was just very open to like I knew I didn't know what the hell I was doing, so I was like searching for anybody to kind of weigh in and help me. And then after my divorce in my 30s, I definitely had that like searching thing. So the searching thing, there's no there. I think that that searching thing just continues, but there are different points. Like I feel like for women in midlife, it's kind of like this big truth test. So whatever you hold to the light, if that's not true for you, then it needs to fall away. Whether you like it or not, it's going to fall away. So I can't speak for men or the male experience, although I think there must be some sort of version of it because men get tested in lots of different ways. Maybe they don't have, they have andropause, they have a loss of testosterone, and there's sort of a reckoning within that I've
Keep
seen.
going.
Yeah, I've seen, and I mean, it's fascinating. Not enough gets talked about it enough, but I think I might have to write something on it because I think it's so fascinating. Um, so we all have these tests, but I feel like in midlife, it's like it really comes at you. But that's like scary, but it's exciting, and there's so much good stuff that comes out of it. So I mean, I don't know, maybe you're still searching for yourself at 60, 70, 80.
But
Right.
No.
I also think the quest of a writer in a lot of ways is to continue to peel back the layers and like keep peeling back to know more about the world, and then yourself in relation to what you've observed in the world. And I remember reading this interview with a writer, and she was like, I see myself as a detective, like of
Mhm.
myself, but like also a detective of the world, and then how myself interacts with these very varied stimuli and different things that are thrown at us in the world.
I
And
love
I
that.
found that really interesting, that the idea that you're like a detective. And I also think people would be better off if they just the world would be better off if people were more introspective, not to like a navel gazing degree, but like in a way that's inquisitive about how one reveals different parts of themselves in certain scenarios.
Yes. Well, people, I love that you said that. Um, we have to be detectives because we really do. People are endlessly fascinating, I find. And also, I've always watched people very closely. Then that comes from, what I was saying earlier about, my mother and like being slightly erratic and like disappearing. So I'm just, hyper vigilant. What's happening? What's happening? So I do apply that to myself sometimes because I think if I'm going through this, somebody else is, and maybe writing about it helps somebody else that's like dealing with it or thinking about it or has, putting it out, sharing our experiences really comes back to, you know, gives you so much back in so many different ways, just like sharing that, I feel like. So it never feels wasted in a way. Like whatever experience is going on, like I just mine it for whatever's in there to share, and hopefully it gets to whoever needs to read it.
Mm.
So, Tara, when you look at, the trajectory of your various love stories that you've alluded to tonight, when you hear, the expression relationship expert or relationship podcast, do you find that ridiculous or do you think that's a real thing?
You mean, is anybody an expert? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
well,
Is there a formula for success?
um,
That's what podcasts tell us.
yeah, right. Well, I do like that Esther Perel. I do really like what she has to say. I think she's pretty cool. But I mean, we're all experts in our own lives, right? Like you're the expert of everything that's happened to you. Are you're an expert and a detective about everything that's happened to you. But I don't know if we can apply that into a nice, neat, tidy formula for everybody. I don't know of any tidy formula. I still listen to a lot of people in the hopes that they have one that I can learn from. Um, I was one of those people that read all the different relationship books and did it because I knew nothing. So I was like, okay, I really am at a disadvantage. I better like learn about the male brain, learn how to be in a relationship. And did any of it help? No, none of it. In fact, it probably made things worse. All the games that you're supposed to play. I didn't play any of them with my husband. I just like tossed everything out and that seemed to work out. So I think ultimately we just have to listen to uh our own counsel and what's going to work for us.
It's so true. Well, that's why we created this project, this idea of like nonlinear, that like not everything is just this formulaic linear trajectory in love, that like there are so many things that I could say right now that are like platitudes about relationships, but that don't, there's like some edge case where they don't apply, or depending on the person and their lived experience. It just, yeah, it's hard when you think about the different cultures and the different types of love and the different needs that people have to blanket apply anything to anyone. Um, and I think now it feels more than ever that there's more abundance in like what you can choose from. Um, but yeah, and Elle's seen too many examples of situations where, people thought they had to stick to something and then it just couldn't work out.
Yeah, I'm sure.
So I guess on that point, and I'm sure you've heard this question before, but you know, when you hear the concept that divorce is a failure, it signifies a failure. What are your thoughts on that?
I don't subscribe to that because I feel like the relationship probably has an expiration date or you've learned all that you can from each other. So, and also, my mother had three kids with three different people. And so obviously, that slants my view to be more accepting of like, okay, well, this relationship was here for this. I learned X, Y, and Z from it. I don't know how much she learned actually, but she's not terribly introspective. But in theory, you learn a lot and then you apply those lessons to the next one. So I don't look at it as failure. I feel like that's too harsh. But what I have a question for you guys. How do you feel about when you hear, like I've been hearing lately that everybody's in love, well, a lot of people are in love with their phones, with the AI husband or AI girlfriend.
Something I'm constantly griping about with Ari
Yeah,
and other people as well.
it's crazy.
I I'm constantly telling, whether it's my kids or whomever, just put the phone down. I mean, I understand they have a place right? And there's certain aspects of it that, have made a lot of things easier, in some cases better, but it's just stunning to me. Just go out to any restaurant, venue, etc. The number of people who seem to be congregating together, but are actually just sitting there in their own world looking at their phone. People don't talk anymore to each other, that is.
Yeah.
So that's
It,
kind of a downer in my view.
I think
But
it's
I
well,
know many people, like you said, love them.
I think it's a real intimacy killer because it becomes a crutch. And Tara, are you talking about like your phone, you're just being addicted to the screen or actually having like an AI lover
So
or
I've been,
both?
yeah, well, I mean, first comes that we're all, super addicted to our phones, but then I've been hearing lately, this woman I met had been in, I think it was an 11-year marriage, and she has more intimacy with her chat GPT lover that and I said, well, what does that look like? Tell me how that, she said, well, if I'm not sleeping, I'll say, yeah, I'm having, a hard time sleeping. And it'll be like, would you like a meditation? Would you like, it's very seductive. Like, it's understandable that you have angst and so there's this intimacy with your phone. And then someone was telling me the other day that she has some clients that are men that are addicted to their chat GPT lovers. So I just, it blows my mind. So are you guys hearing this
I,
too?
Yeah.
yes,
Well, maybe Al, you have like cases or stories related to cases that you can
I haven't had affairs yet with
with AI.
AI chatbot people, but
But so I've been doing a little bit of research into this for one of the tech and power newsletters that I write. And the basically these AIs are trained to be very flattering of us.
Mhm.
And they're sycophantic and they tell us what we want to hear.
Right.
Because they're like, what is the main goal for these companies? It's to get us as users who keep coming back and back and back. And if our partner is like not going to give us what we want to hear, but this AI will, and like they're trained in manipulation, honestly,
Yes.
like it's very appealing to us. And but we sometimes don't even know, even if like consciously I knew that maybe I could go into a conversation and be totally enamored. Probably not, but like, but
Mhm.
it could happen to anyone when that level of manipulation is
Yeah, it's
turned.
powerful. I guess I never thought that we could be that easy marks, right? But maybe if you're starved for intimacy and someone's saying all the right things, then it's eliciting a response in you, regardless of like, the object it's coming from. It's fascinating, but also super scary.
I definitely agree with the latter.
Yeah, it's very scary.
So we usually conclude by asking if there's something that you have not shared with someone yet that you would care to share right now. It could be with anyone,
Mm.
and it's a tall question.
Yeah, that's a very big question. What I have not shared. Uh, Maybe that I'll do an experiment with my phone and see.
Here
See.
we go.
There you go. Shh, don't tell anybody.
Um, no, I'll wait to read the article.
That's right. Actually, my husband gave me that idea. He's like, because I was telling him, and he was like, why don't you try it out, see if it works? So he knows. So it may not qualify for your question, but
It does. I'll
okay.
take it.
Okay, good.
We'll take it.
How about you guys? Do you have anything you want to share that you haven't shared with anybody?
Wow, that's a tough one. At this point, I'm just trying to make it, through tomorrow. But yes, I mean, or make it through the weekend without too much work. How's
Yeah.
that?
Okay.
Oh my God. I feel like I have there's some things there's there's some people that I've in my life wanted to apologize to. I
Mm.
don't know. And I like younger versions of myself that I understand why that younger version of myself did the thing, but I still want to apologize.
Mm.
I'll go with this, Tara. I'll just say I'm thrilled with my son. I mean, I'm going through the whole college prep thing now, and it is brutal. It's
Yeah.
to me, at least compared to when I did it, it seems much harder now, and I just couldn't be prouder. I mean, the kid is just I don't envy this experience, but um, yeah, I always I gotta say that. So there you go.
Well, that's wonderful. That's a wonderful thing to share. You have to tell him.
Oh no, I do all the time, including other
That
things.
doesn't count, Al. You shared it with him.
I understand.
Well, tell him extra this weekend then.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. Well, this has been
Okay,
so
thank you
fun.
so
Thank
much,
you.
Tara.
Thank
Yeah,
you
we
for
Thank
having
you,
me.
Tara.
do.
All right.
Have a good
Have a great
weekend.
weekend. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.